results in jumping the traditional UGF revenues, to $3.7 billion, more than $1 billion higher than the traditional revenues included in the fall forecast and on which the budget's based. That translates through in terms of how the budget looks from a deficit, at current law deficit, counting the PFD at the statutory levels. That was a deficit that was included in the fall forecast. The FY23 budget using the current oil price now balances. There's $4.6 billion, $3.7 billion in traditional revenues. Current law has the portion of the POMB draw that goes to the general fund as what's remaining after the statutory PFD is taken out. That's how current law works. $600 million from the POMB that goes to government, and then the governor threw in another $400 million from federal revenues, COVID revenues that can be used toward state spending. That jumps the budget or the revenue side from significantly lower, from about $3.7 billion or $3.5 billion in the fall revenue forecast to $4.6 billion. So the budget, the current law budget, full statutory PFD now balances based on the higher oil prices. That doesn't continue through the 10-year forecast. There continue to be deficits, current law deficits in the budget from FY24 through the end of the decade. But the FY23 budget at least balances. So it's a significant impact. Those higher oil prices are having a significant impact on the FY23 budget. Now, we can get into a debate whether those higher oil prices continue, whether there's a reaction to the higher oil prices in terms of demand drop, and that has an impact on price as we get into FY23. But as of right now, we've jumped $1 billion higher, and I think that's something that we ought to note at least when it occurs, and look at the consequence if that oil price was realized.
All right, well, let's take a peek at it. I mean, I guess my main concern is this is all here's been my concern from the beginning, and you could tell me if I'm off base on this or not. My concern is that this is all very short-sighted. We see it in the short term. Oh, look, we're going to be well, but it's in the year 3 and 4 and 5 that all of a sudden we're going to be right back to where we were again, fighting it out and duking it out over the PFD.
Yeah, well, and as we'll get into in the second segment, we're going to duke it out this year, because now with this additional cash, everybody's got ideas on how they can use that additional cash, which will unbalance the budget again, and as the legislature has been doing since 2017, take it out of the PFD. So we're going to duke it out this year, but at least it's worth noting, at least as of this 10 seconds, the budget is in balance. The current law budget is in balance. But you're exactly right. I mean, you go to 2024, even at what the futures market is telling us about oil prices. 2024, there's a $400 million deficit. 2026, $700 million deficit. 2027, there's an $800 million deficit. So we're looking at deficits all the way through the remainder of the decade of some substantial size. This is an aberration. This year, FY23 is an aberration in terms of the impact. It's because oil prices decline. I mean, the futures market is saying that oil prices decline after FY23. So this year's an aberration, and we duke it out in future years. But we're likely going to duke it out this year because of people talking about increased spending. But at least at this point in time, oil prices have increased enough that we've found temporarily, I guess, a balance on FY23.
All right. Well, I know you wanted to do some. I know you wanted to probably show some charts and stuff, which luckily enough, I do have the chart that you included in your in your message to me, so I could put that up on the screen if you want to discuss that, the comparison of traditional revenues, and I'm ready to do that whenever you are. So proceed ahead.
Well, it's that chart shows the traditional revenues uh, at the spring forecast, which is in blue, the fall forecast, which is in red, and based on current futures market, which is in black. And it starts in FY22, the current fiscal year, and shows that we're having a surge in revenues. Those are more secure because we're 60% of the way through the year right now. So we're likely going to achieve revenues in FY22 that are in excess of what was included in the fall forecast. What I've been talking about is FY23, which is the next slide over, and the next piece over, and that's where the $3.7 billion in projected revenues, traditional revenues, now shows up, compared to the red, which was the fall forecast of 2.6, and the spring forecast, which was 1.9. At the top of that chart are oil prices, and you can see that the $87 oil price for 2023, and then see the decline in oil prices that the futures market is projecting down to $80 in FY24, 77 and 25, 75 and 26, and so on, which results in declining traditional revenues, which, as I said before, opens back up deficits in the projected budget that the governor did, the projected 10-year forecast. But we are better off through all those years based upon the current futures market, and we're in balance, again, just probably temporarily, but in balance for FY23.
Well, and again, that's good. Long and shorted here, there for me though, Brad. Where do we end up when it's all said and done? I mean, how does this end? I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, we're going to talk about some of that in the second segment, Michael, because we're going to talk about the people who now want that money, the increases that are people coming forward and asking for increases. So what it leads to is now requests for that money. And people having ideas about, like Les Guerra's defined benefits program, and other things. People now coming forward and saying, "Well, if we got all this extra money, extra compared to what we had projected, then I've got a place for that." And so we're going to talk about in the next segment what happens as we start talking about these additional requests for money. Where is it coming from? Whose pocket is it coming out of? Who's going to pay as we get into the next phase of this?
All right. Well, before we jump into number two, then let's finalize. Let's go back one quick click here. Then back to number one, talking about all these new revenues projections and the billions. How much of this is accounting voodoo? How much of this is moving stuff around in the right way? And how much of it is I think real and I guess for true. And if Brad was the one that was writing these projections, how different would they look?
Well, I think the projections are pretty good. I mean, the projections are Department of Revenue's forecast of revenues at certain oil price levels, traditional revenues at certain oil price levels, and the soft spot in all of that is whether the futures market is accurately predicting what the revenues are going to be or what the oil prices are going to be. We know that oil prices will differ from the futures market, but we don't know how much, and we don't know. Frankly, we don't even know in what direction. So this is sort of a look in time, a snapshot in time of where we are if the futures market oil prices were realized over the next fiscal year and over the subsequent 10 years. That's the soft spot. Whether the oil prices actually achieve those. There's not much moving around other than that. If Brad were doing this, Brad would be looking at a smoothing of oil prices, a smoothing on the revenue side, consistent with a spending cap using a revenue-based spending cap that would say, we can't count on the futures market at any given point in time. we're going to look back in history a little bit, and we're going to smooth oil prices over time. So, taking into account the lower oil prices from earlier years, we would have a lower we would have a lower revenue projection or a lower revenue base that we were using for budgeting. But right now, the governor's using, the legislature's using projected oil prices for their budgeting, and so those projected prices that they're using, which is based on the futures market, is moving in a positive direction and moving in a substantially positive direction.
Which again leads us now to, okay, now that the money's there, who's going to come ask for it? And we're going to talk about that here in just a second with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. All right, we're going to be back with more here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We continue with the weekly top three right after this.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
And of course, I get it all back up and running, and of course, Facebook doesn't pick it back up. So now we're just on YouTube and Twitch this morning. Of course, but you do have video and you do have sound, so everybody's happy. What more could a guy ask for?
Well, do you want to switch back over to Skype then, or just hold it here?
Well, if you want to try it on Skype again, if you've got more stuff to share, I'd love to see it. We can give it a shot and see what it looks like. I'm happy to do that if you want to give it a try.
No, we're pretty much through the screen sharing part. If you want to stick here, all you're going to get if we go back to Skype is my face.
All right. Well, nobody wants to see my face, let alone yours. So I'm with you on that. Yeah. I don't know, man. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I feel like, oh, look, I got it. Never mind. It was broken from the beginning.
Well, a year from now, we'll have all these bugs worked out, and it'll be running smooth, right?
Supposedly, that's the plan. I'm just going to keep turning the settings down until everything works properly. At this point, that's what I feel like. I feel like I just got to keep turning all the settings down until the whole thing is up and running. And there you go. Jimmy says, so glitchy on my end. You could still listen on the stream off my website if you want to do that, Jimmy. It apparently is still smooth as silk. So if you're having a problem there, otherwise, like I said, I'm going to just turn all my video and audio settings down on this video thing until it actually starts working properly. It's been working fine for years. Then all of a sudden you make one tweak to it and you're like, now nothing likes anything. So it is what it is. Harold in the chat room, always one to stir the conversation up, Brad, says, where does the flat tax fit in all this now? Because it's all...
Oh, there's still deficits, Harold. There's deficits in FY24 out to the end of the decade.
Yeah.
And if we want to have continued spending, which evidently the legislature wants to do that, and we want to have statutory PFDs, there's deficits that have to be filled.
There you go. Harold, mission accomplished. You got him to say flat tax. That's what it is. If that's what we want. And I think that's the big thing here, Brad, is if it is what we want. And I think more and more, most people don't want new revenues. They want the spending to be controlled. Unfortunately, we got a bunch of yahoos in there who basically just say, no, we're going to do it our way. We want to spend, and we're going to protect the government spend no matter what it costs the rest of the Alaskan economy.
Well, we had that test in 2019. I mean, the governor proposed the deep spending cuts, and we had the pushback in the legislature. The governor couldn't even get 16 to support the spending cuts that he proposed. He ended up with much smaller spending cuts, which we've since lost through spending increases elsewhere. And the governor's not even proposing spending cuts anymore. So significant spending cuts anymore. So it's we had that moment in time where he tried in 2019, couldn't even get 16 legislators to back him up, 16 out of 60 to back him up. And that moment in time seems to have passed.
I often think about, well, Mike, what would you have done if you were governor? And you know what? I got to say, I think I still would have stuck with it. I think I would have. I mean, that's what I promised. That's what I said I was going to do, even if I was going to be only a one-term governor or maybe even less. Maybe the recall continued, although I think the recall didn't have a chance in the long run once COVID hit. I think I still would have proposed. I would have stuck to those and proposed in reducing budgets. That would have laid it all at the legislators' feet. I mean, that they would have been the ones that had to live with that. And I really think that should have been done.
Yeah, he ran. At that time, the administration with Tuckerman as chief of staff, I think he was prepared to push it through. But when they went to count noses in the legislature, they didn't have 16 to back him up. So what he was going to do is stick with those vetoes, veto back down to the budget that he'd originally proposed, and put those legislators on the hot seat and see if when it came time to count those publicly, 16 stood up. But they didn't have 16 in private. I mean, the reason they backed off is they didn't have 16 in private. So, whether put out in the light of day, 16 would have stood up with him, even though they told him they couldn't do it in private. I don't know, but that's where the rubber met the road when they did the nose count on whether they had 16 to back him up.
Well, I think, and I'm going to start off with this as we come back from the break, but Kevin McCabe nails part of the problem. He says the problem is we never get visits or emails from people who want us to cut the budget to limit spending. All we ever get is visits or emails from people who want more, every day, all day. And, they are active. I will say it. They're active and they are out there, and I think that is part of the problem. So I'm going to start with that, and then we'll let you lead into that, Brad, with number 2. Brad Keithley is our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. I've posted the link on Facebook this morning for this YouTube video because, Facebook is now not working, but whatever. We're going to jump back into it here. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's get to it. Here we go. All right, continuing now with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're going to talk about number 2, which, of course, is now that we've identified the fact that there's going to be surpluses and all this money, people are going to start coming out of the woodwork. We were just talking during the break about how there was no political will, it seemed like, to cut, that we want the budgets to be cut, but maybe not anybody else. Kevin McCabe, Representative McCabe, says the problem is we never get visits or emails from people who want us to cut the budget, to limit spending. All we ever get is visits or emails from people who want more, every day, all day. And we're about to see more of that, right, Brad? I mean, that's kind of the business as usual aspect of what we're seeing.
Oh, absolutely. The legislature is going to see that. And why don't legislators get emails or visits from people who want them to cut the budget? Because there's no money in for the money for individual citizens who want spending cuts is in better PFDs. Now, does that fund a trip to Juneau to visit your legislator? Probably not. It funds maybe an email or certainly comments on social media, on Facebook pages, but there's not money in it, enough money in it for individual citizens to realize from those budget cuts to really fund a concentrated effort to hire a lobbyist or have a concentrated effort to go down to Juneau to press for that. On the other hand, the university, for example, which is seeking an increase in its budget, the mayor of Anchorage, who's seeking $600 million for the Port of Anchorage, Port of Alaska, in additional funding. There's money in it for those people. I mean, if they can go down and they can get legislators to grant them the money, it's well worth the small investment or the investment of spending the time and hiring a lobbyist and spending the time to go down to Juneau to press for it. So it's the incentives for those who want spending cuts don't translate into let's go to Juneau. I mean, that's one of the things about about having the capital in Juneau as opposed to Anchorage. If it was in South Central, if it was in Anchorage or somewhere else in South Central, people might get in their cars to go visit the legislators,
Right.
to drive to the legislative office building to go visit the legislators to press for that. But that's not. I mean, the setup we have now is you have to go down to Juneau to press for it, and the incentives are only for those people who are seeking additional funds. And who have the money to hire lobbyists who want the additional funds enough to view that opportunity as enough to pay for lobbyists to go down there and press for it. So it's. I mean, you can see why that is, but that's what it is.
Well, and I think that's why it's number 2 on the Charter of Changes. And I was arguing yesterday, maybe it should be number 1, that the legislative session should be on the road system. I mean, we do hear about a few meetings, a few bills that are heard in testimony periods where 98% of the calls were to get the fiscal house in order and pay a full PFD. And then they look at the camera and they go, well, that's fine, but you guys just don't really understand the reality of the situation. Whereas if there had been a room full of 200, 300 people standing there, I just doubt that they would look them in the eye and say exactly the same thing. That's part of the problem. Yeah,
it is part of the problem. And the people who, once the camera shuts down and they go back to their office, the people who are coming to their offices are people who are telling them, Johnny's not going to be able to read, or there's not going to be enough teachers, or there's not going to be this, or there's not going to be that if the state doesn't give more money. I mean, that's what's going on right now. The University of Alaska has pressed forward for more money than the administration proposed. Not only did Governor Dunleavy not pursue the third year of spending cuts that he'd originally agreed with the University of Alaska, the administration itself has proposed increased spending for the University of Alaska in the FY23 budget. And now the university has come down to the legislature and is proposing money on top of additional money on top of what the governor's increase was proposed.
Right.
And as I said, the mayor of Anchorage, the conservative mayor of Anchorage, we're going to get our fiscal house in order, mayor of Anchorage, has gone down hat in hand for $600 million to help fund the Port of Anchorage, state dollars to help fund the Port of Anchorage. So it's not. I mean, everybody now that there's some money back on the table, you're going to see a lot of people pushing for. Oh, I just want a little bit for my thing, and my thing's important. The rest of the stuff, don't worry about that. But my thing's important. And when you got 60 legislators, I mean, each of those legislators are going to have something that they think is important, and they're going to press for. And that's how we got in this situation in the first place. The point I want to make about this, though, is we have with the increase in traditional revenues projected by higher oil prices, we are barely at a balanced budget. I mean, we're right at the balanced budget with those higher oil prices. Balanced current law budget, which means a full statutory PFD. So now if we divert some of that money, or if we decide to spend more on the University of Alaska, or we decide to give some to the city of Anchorage for its port, or any of the other 50 asks that are going to be made of the legislature as we get into this budget process, who's going to pay for it is going to be the PFD. It's going to come out of the PFD because nobody's talking about substitute revenues now.
Right.
And so it's going to be what we're sort of at the high, you can view this as the high watermark. We've got the budget balanced at the statutory PFD. We could do what the current law says with the revenues we've got. But now we're going to have people coming in going, I need a little bit more for the university. I need a little bit more for K through 12. I need a little bit more for the city of Anchorage. I'm sure Fairbanks has projects. I'm sure Kenai has projects. I'm sure the Valley has projects that they just want a little bit more. And this is more important than everybody else, but I just wanted a little bit more. And all of that, you can view that. I will view that as coming out of the PFD, that it's going to be middle and lower income Alaska families through cuts on what could otherwise be a full statutory PFD. That's going to be paying for all of these additional projects. So if we give the university a little bit more, it's middle and lower income Alaska families who have paid for it through PFD cuts. If we give Mayor Bronson $600 million or whatever portion of that the legislature decides to give them, it's going to be middle and lower income Alaska families that are paying for that through PFD cuts.
Well, and let's face it, a $600 million give to the Port of Alaska or Port of Anchorage puts us basically back almost exactly where we are right now, halfway to a statutory PFD. And as you say, they're not going to cut other programs to fund that money. They're going to look at, as they have in the past, they're going to look at the PFD and go, oh, easy fix. Here, take this money. Even though it affects lower and middle income Alaskan families and has the highest impact on the private economy, go ahead. We'll do that. That's exactly what they're going to do. It's the easiest route, and they've taken it before.
Yep, exactly right. And it's just, I mean, we're getting right back into the situation that we were in throughout the 2010s of pushing for additional spending. Then we had the shock absorber during all of that time. We had the shock absorber of savings, and so we could tell ourselves, well, we're just going to give a little bit of savings this year. And we'll ride through this and it'll be okay and we won't have to worry about it and oil prices will come back up. Well, they never did. We ran through, $20 billion between the CBR and the SBR. We ran through $20 billion of savings. Oil prices never came back up, but we continued spending. And now that oil prices are coming back up a little bit, the pressure is going to be on to increase not only not cut, but not even hold the line on spending. The pressure is going to be on increasing spending. But people need to focus on the fact it's going to be coming out of the PFD.
Right.
But that's who's going to be paying for it. Middle and lower, it's going to be a tax on middle and lower income Alaska families that are going to be paying for it.
Period. That we're already paying for. And now for the first time, it look like we get a little relief. And no relief for you. Let's move on to number 3, Brad. The governor, not only will it be the university and others that'll be looking to spend this new money, now the governor's proposing a whole new energy program that I imagine is going to require a lot of state lucre to help grease the skid, so to speak, on this renewable energy future.
Yep, we've had under statutes passed when Sarah Palin was governor, we've had a 50% renewable power mandate on the books. We haven't come close to that, but we've had one on the books. The governor proposes to replace that with one that sets an 80% of the rail belt's energy would come from, or electric energy would come from renewable sources by 2050. And here's the ways that one of the outside consultants that the administration of others have been relying on. Here's the ways that they have proposed that could be achieved. One, the state could build the vast Susitna-Watana hydroelectric project and bring the Bradley Lake hydroelectric dam to full capacity. Key words in that is the state could.
Right.
Second, the state could expand Bradley Lake, build dams at Grant Lake near Moose Pass and Snow River north of Seward, then add some wind and solar power. 3, it could expand Bradley Lake, but additional wind and solar. 4, it could use geothermal power and tidal power as well as wind. The assumption in all of these is the state could. And basically what Governor Dunleavy is proposing sounds great. 80% of our power ought to come from renewable power. But what that essentially is saying is the state ought to fund additional renewable projects, primarily the hydroelectric projects. The state ought to fund additional renewable projects and recover and get to the renewable achievement that way. Not through private sector investment, right. not through market forces, but through state subsidies. And the statement is, well,
30,
if we build all these capital projects, the operating costs will be lower of these projects, and so the energy cost to consumers will be lower. Yeah, but it will have cost us a bunch of upfront money to be able to do it.
How much is the original investment going to be? That's the big thing. We'll continue this during the break. Brad Keithley, thank you so much for coming on board today.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Out of time, folks, for this hour. We got more coming up. We're going to keep with Brad Keithley. We'll see you. So, I mean, that's the big thing, Brad. Oh, okay, great. It'll be cheaper to operate. It'll be cheaper for us to have, it'll be lower energy in the long run. But nobody's talking about the initial investment that's being made with state dollars in the end.
Oh, a lot of people are talking about it. Those people who would get contracts to build those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Kevin. If Kevin McCabe's still on, Kevin, you're going to get a lot of visits from people who will say this renewable energy bill is a great thing because, wow, look at all this. If we just spend a few $1 billion here and a few $1 billion there on capital projects, we'll have these lower operating costs going forward and the cost of power will go down. Well, yeah.
Right. And you'll be stimulating the economy, right? And you'll be creating jobs. I mean, all these, it doesn't matter that they're short-term jobs, and it doesn't matter that the cost of investment will never, be paid back. But other than that, there you go.
And whose pocket will it come out of? Once again, it'll be through PFD cuts because nobody's proposing a broader base substitute. It'll be PFD cuts. It'll come out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families. And they'll go to Kevin's office and they'll tell him all the great things it's going to do. It's really to the benefit of Alaskans. So it's okay if we take their PFD to be able to fund it because they'll get the benefits of that. And we have Eisenhower called it back in the day the military industrial complex. In Alaska, we have the government contracts industrial complex going on. Everybody's got an idea about how they can spend state money. Nobody can raise it privately. Everybody's got a great idea about how they can spend state money. And it just needs to. It's just a little bit out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families.
Well, that's exactly it. It's the crony capitalism complex that we have here in this state, whether it's places like GCI with all the telecom money or the Association of General Contractors who are loving the fact that they want to build a new school building every 12 years or whatever it is. It's all these different people that love to go down there into the legislators' offices and tell them why it's such a good idea to spend all that government money because they're the ones that are picking up the contracts for it.
Yep, exactly right, Michael. And back to Kevin's point, the middle and lower income Alaska families that are getting hosed through PFD cuts to pay for all this really don't have a voice in the process because they can't get to Juneau to compete on an equal footing basis with the lobbyists and with those who are seeking the money. So it's a mismatch in terms of lobbying power, in terms of persuasive power. The only pushback that the ordinary citizen has is at the voting booth. Right.
Well, this goes right back to the Charter of Changes, changing out the players and changing the venue and doing all that stuff. But that's kind of where we're at. We've got to get back to that because otherwise we're going to just be faced with more of this and more of this and more of this as we continue. It'll be business as usual all over again.
Yeah, we see that oil prices are up. We see the benefit of that to Alaskans in terms of being able to achieve at least for 1 year a balanced budget, a balanced current law budget. But all that's really doing, all those higher oil prices are really doing is activating the swarm to go in and say, oh no, I can spend that money better than mom and pop Alaskans can. So give me that money. Increase as opposed to cutting the university as the governor originally proposed. Give me not only the increase the administration's proposed, give me an additional amount on top of that. You give me $600 million to the Port of Anchorage. Give me this and that for various other projects throughout the state, and we'll be good steward. We'll spend that money well. It'll really benefit Alaskans well, as opposed to letting the money flow as the current statutes provide into the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families, so that through their spending they can stimulate the private sector.
Well, we love to see it. We'd love to see real private sector stimulation We'd like to see those monies going into the hands of Alaskans instead of government picking winners and losers, which is what they've been doing, and doing such a bang-up job of it at this point. I mean, we would love to see that, but it's going to take, again, a wholesale change in how the legislature does business. And right now, Rob Myers pointed out yesterday that since 2016, we've changed out 2/3 of the legislature. Unfortunately, we haven't changed out the 1/3 that seems to matter at this point.
Yeah. We haven't changed the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't changed the chairman of the House Finance Committee. I mean, yes, we make changes, but those changes, once they get down to Juneau, don't translate into changes in the power structure in Juneau.
Right.
And that's the disappointing part of it. I mean, I remember Bert Stedman had been chair of Senate Finance up until 2012. In the election of 2012, a bunch of new senators came in, replaced him as chair. But it didn't. I guess that didn't even change things, because we just started spending down savings as opposed to getting the budget in order. So it's a lot to be frustrated about. But we need to focus on the fact that this additional spending is coming out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families. It is a tax on middle and lower income Alaska families. As much as the legislature wants to overlook that or deny it or shift the discussion to other things, this additional spending that the universities propose, that the mayor of Anchorage has proposed, that others will propose, that we'll see in the days forward, is coming out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families.
Well, Brad, as always, thought-provoking and irritating at the same time. Congratulations. You made it happen. So we appreciate it. Thank you, my friend.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right. Appreciate you coming on board. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Out of time for this segment. We got more coming up. Hour 2 dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast. The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or translator, and around the world, again, at michaeldukeshow.com on the internet if you'd like to join us. That's where you can go to get all the good stuff. Get the goods. It's all out there. Welcome back to the program. It is hour 2 of the Michael Dukes Show. We have got... we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and he laid out some big truths there in the weekly top 3. If you missed it, you can go back on the podcast and listen to it, or I guess go back and watch the replay on YouTube. But the bottom line is that we are continuing on as business as usual in this state. The minute that we have a new surplus, which is what they're talking about now, this new fiscal year 23 surplus. The minute that we have it, immediately the chanting begins for more money, more money, more money. The clamor and hue from the university asking not just for the fact that, as Brad pointed out, that the governor proposed had made an agreement with them to have a $20 million budget cut each year. Not to mention the fact the governor ignored his own agreement and has funded that even more beyond that. Now on top of that, beyond that, now they're asking for even more. And it won't be just that. It will be others as well. And we're going to see more people pile up and get ready to be asking and clamoring at the food line of, hey, we need some more. We need some more over here. We need some more over here. And as Brad pointed out, the crony capitalists are going to be the first one that are going to be lined up to get theirs for their companies, to hire their people and to get their projects going. So no surprise here. I mean, it's just business. We just can't even see the forest for the trees in this state. I don't know. I just can't fathom it. Right? To quote a stateswoman, I just can't fathom it. All right. We have got Chris Story coming up in this hour. We're going to do the weekly PMA and uplift and life coaching with him. But we've got some headlines, and we're also going to take some phone calls from folks who are on board this morning. So why don't we get started? Why don't we get started over here on the phone calls, since we've got one up and ready to go? Let's go over here and see what you have to say. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good morning. My name is Holly, and I'm calling from Talkeetna. And
Hello,
the
Holly.
only way we're going to be able to attend to fixing anything is to be able to fix our elections. And we have corrupt elections. It's death by 1,000 cuts. The governor's bill that took part of Shower's bill is all a diversion. It doesn't attend to the most very important thing that must happen in Alaska, which is paper ballot hand count. And we don't have too many people to do it. It's the only way to change out bad actors. And ranked choice voting did not win in Alaska. I want to just briefly tell you, Michael, that a lot of citizens in Alaska that don't live in the cities have a lot of belief in you. I got a call early this morning from Antioch to please call in and ask for help. So let me line this out right quick. Ranked choice voting at the end of the in-person election, when 441 precincts reported 100%, was around 80,000 for and over 105,000 against ballot measure 2.
Right.
No more votes were counted for 6 days. Then the votes started coming in. These votes did not have a witness signature on the ballot, which the Andino decision from the U.S. Supreme Court said that states would not remove the witness signature on ballots. These ballots that came in, 158,000 through the ensuing weeks to November 30th, they came in every couple days. Ballots were counted. Like I said, they didn't have witness signatures. It was illegal. The voting had the ballots had no chain of custody. By the time November 30th arrived, ballot measure 2, quote, won by less than 1%, and we cannot stand for this.
Now, I mean, before you go on, I mean, I know that they did a hand recount of that ballot, but your assertion is because the ballots, that some of the ballots came in without signatures. I don't know how many, but some of them came in without signatures. You're saying that made the difference, and you're basically asserting that it was voter fraud because they came in without signatures. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, and it wasn't just some of them. Danny Crosby, judge from Superior Court in Anchorage, overruled the U.S. Supreme Court, and she completely removed the witness signatures. It is a huge ruse. There is evidence. There's irrefutable evidence. There's no chain of custody. And think about it. If there was 182,000 ballots that were counted at the end of all in-person voting, plus the first part of early voting was counted within those ballots. Afterwards, starting a week after, run every day or so, and we have all the stats. We got a FOIA request. All of the voting between starting a week after the end of the election through the end of the month was 158,000 votes. Think about it. It's impossible. It's ballot stuffing, it's ballot harvesting, it's death by 1,000 cuts. It is illegal what is happening in Alaska, and we showed the governor how to hack the Dominion voting machines. 5 public meetings in South Central Alaska were held. Michael Dunleavy came to our meeting March 6th in the side room with a windbreak, and we showed him how to hack the voting machines. And he told us, our South Central contingency, that he would get back to us. He never did. I don't know what happened to the man, but he's not speaking for himself.
Right. Let me ask you this. If you have all this proof, I mean, and because, I mean, I've heard a lot of this, you know, over the course since the presidential election, we've heard a lot of this. But, I mean, when it's all said and done, they've stood a lot of this stuff up in court, and a lot of it's been disproven and everything else. But if you have stuff here in the state of Alaska specifically, why aren't we going to court over this? Why isn't this being challenged in other ways outside of the original recount and those kind of things?
Okay, so let me take that recount just for a second before answering the second part of your question. The recount was recounting the same corrupt votes, okay? We need a forensic analysis or a forensic audit. If they're going to force ranked choice voting on Alaska, there needs to be a forensic audit to show that it won, because it didn't. Now, it quote won in most all the states, but only 3 implemented, plus Alaska. 3 most corrupt states plus the most corrupt, Alaska, is actually implementing this vote that they cannot prove. Now, as to the second part, I'm not at liberty to talk this week about the answer to your second part, but I would love to visit with you next week regarding that.
Okay. Well, feel free to call us back in next week then and talk with us about it, because, I mean, I'm all for taking a look at the proof and talking about it, and if it's true, it's true. If it's not, I just don't want it to be more of the same, the Sidney Powell stuff and everything else, which, basically turned out to not have all the horsepower behind it that they claimed it did. And so, I mean, I'm not a fan of ranked choice voting, but I want to make sure that what you're asserting is true. So I appreciate it. Thank you for calling in this morning and being part of it. Let's go over here. We got maybe time for one more call before we go to break. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Randy in Fairbanks.
Good morning, Randy.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment about the trucker strike, the Canadian trucker strike.
Mm-hmm.
While I agree with what they're protesting about, which is against the vaccine mandates. I know I'm very much against the vaccine mandates. I just don't like how truckers, the Canadian truckers, were blocking the bridges and clogging up streets and everything. And I think it's good to have a protest, but if they wanted to have a big giant gathering of trucks and everything, they should pull off the side of the road or get into an empty field or something and have their protest there, or else stay on the move where traffic behind can keep on going and go where they want to go. And I hope American truck drivers never do that. It just gives truckers a bad name, in my opinion. And I was wondering, too, I don't think American truckers would do that. I hope they wouldn't. But Canadians would, and maybe it's because they have some kind of more of a European mindset or something. I remember over the years reading about how some French farmers, every time they protest, they very inconsiderately go and block up and clog up stuff, and maybe it's because the heritage of Europe involves brutish governments, brutish monarchies, and so they think that the only way to handle it is to go and set up guillotines and chop off everybody's head indiscriminately, whether they're guilty or not.
Well,
and maybe that's kind of their mindset.
I mean, there is an American convoy that's, I heard, that was getting formed. I don't know if they plan to do the same thing, go to Washington or do whatever. But I mean, while it would be inconvenient if I lived in Ottawa, I just don't see it being as wrong-headed as you say. I mean, these people are trying to get their government's attention. Holding a protest on the side of a road somewhere may be well and good, but when the government doesn't respond and completely ignores them, this type of civil disobedience is really the most most American of ideals. I mean, really, they're doing something that I think is kind of the epitome of what is American, that civil disobedience. Yes, it needs to be inconvenient. You need to make people think. You need to make the government respond. You need to make people, actually consider what's going on instead of just looking at the parade as it passes them by, kind of thing. So, I'm just going to disagree with you. I think that blocking the downtown, while inconvenient if you lived there and everything else, definitely gets the attention that you've been seeking. If they'd just been holding this on the side of the road somewhere, would they have gotten the national media attention and put the pressure on the government of Canada that they did otherwise?
I don't know. It depends how the media reports it. But when I think of civil disobedience, I think of protesters handcuffing themselves to some railing or something. But that doesn't block anybody off. I mean, it's a real. I know I would hate to be blocked off from going to work or something by a bunch of inconsiderate people jamming up the roads, the arteries of commerce. And I just don't think that's the American way. I mean, maybe Occupy Wall Street was, people squatting down in the park, that doesn't really hurt anybody. Maybe they're not supposed to be in the park, but that's civil disobedience. But that doesn't stop commerce and doesn't inconvenience me. Just maybe it looks bad, leaves some trash in the park or whatever. But I think it's un-American to do that.
Well, I mean, you could feel it's un-American. Like I said, I feel like it is the most American of expressions because, again, the government's not listening, and they're not going to listen. If they're just parked on the side of the road doing their thing there, they have to make some kind of. I mean, this is the march and the protest on Washington. This is the Occupy Wall Street. This is this is something that we've done for decades in this country, a couple hundred years, in fact. So not a big deal. Appreciate your call. Thank you very much. We're up against the break. We've got Chris Story coming up here in just a second. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more here. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Don't ever look at the screen and see something while you're trying to talk. Back with more and Chris Story right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
I mean, can you imagine Canadian truckers being mean? Or, I mean, Canadians just always, sorry. I mean, they're just so polite, right? They're just so Canadian. I mean, I know that's stereotypical. It's like the stereotype of the loud and obnoxious American. But at the same time, I mean, it's, can you imagine a Canadian? I'm sorry, but I must park right here. I'm sorry that I'm blocking. I'm sorry. Oh, it is peaceful protests. Peaceful protests for sure. Anyway, we'll see what happens here. Let me go back in the chat room to see what some of you guys have been saying. You guys, let's see. Randy is making some comments. Hard to have a forensic audit when the ballot envelopes, which had or were supposed to have the signatures on them, have been destroyed, says Kevin. Yeah, I mean, I could never understood. When I heard that first time, I was like, well, wait a second. To be a valid mail-in ballot, it had to have that witness signature line, and yet you're telling me you only retain the ballots and not the envelopes? How can you check the ballots if the envelopes are not with them? I mean, that didn't make any sense to me. How can you possibly do that when the ballot? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. American truckers aren't at risk. Randy keeps adding his 2 cents here. Hey, Peter North was in the chat room. I love getting trolled by people who I have no idea who they are. I will never ask a trucker to have a vax so I can have my Cheerios, says Laura. No, me either. Well, Randy Trudeau has been obstructing Canadians' way of life for over 2 years now. Seems to think his whims are to be obeyed at all times. They're trying to make a statement and get the government's attention, save their jobs and lives. Also, it's not a violent protest like what happened in Portland and Seattle. The civil rights protesters wouldn't have gotten the original civil rights protesters in the 60s wouldn't have gotten anywhere without civil disobedience. Our elections are secure. They have been and will continue to be secure, says Harold. Boy, he has some real faith there. American truckers will be more rowdy than Canadians. Canadians have a reputation for being nice. Randy, as usual, doesn't know what he's talking about. Make their voices heard. I hope they break him. You can't deny folks from voting. It's a fundamental right in this country. Take your cross-checks and signature requirements to the garbage dump where they belong. That's the dumbest comment I've ever heard, Harold. Voting security is a thing. No, you can't deny people their fundamental right of voting. But you also need to make sure that they're secure so the people who have not voted or have already voted or are not eligible to vote can't vote. Just take your cross to the dump. Yeah. Right. And like asking for a signature or for ID is denying them the right to vote. That's the biggest load of horse swallow I ever heard. I mean, that is some...
That was just BS.
That's exactly right. Voter database got hacked. Yeah, exactly. Those requirements are critical to ensure registered voters vote, and the person who's voting is who they say they are. In Anchorage, there was a truckers' convoy. I think it was a good protest because I think it kept them moving and didn't tie up in snarl traffic, says Randy. Well, I mean, it did tie up in snarl traffic, but, not for long periods of time. It was what it was. All right, where's Chris' story? Where is he this morning? You can't deny folks their fundamental right. Nobody said deny them their fundamental right to vote. Nobody said that. I mean, only you are saying that. Nobody else said that. Just you. You're the one that's saying it's all about denying people's rights to vote. Everybody else is saying that it's about the security of the vote, that you can't get compromised. We've been hacked several times. All the other security questions. There you go. Nobody said that we were denying them their right to vote. You're the one that's turning it to that, not anybody else. Which, again, out of the mouth speaks the heart. That raises a lot of questions. I'm just saying. That just raises some serious questions. Here we go. All right, we are moving ahead here. Time for our weekly life coaching lesson with the man, the myth, the legend, Chris Story, the guy who's so good he has his own theme song.
Chris Story, the obnoxiously positive and sometimes hilarious man from Homer, joins us every week to talk about pottery, positivity, and how not to become a nihilist. We're looking at you, Eric. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
That's right. Positivity, and how not to become a nihilist. He's actually got that on his business cards. Good morning, my friend. How are you doing?
Good morning, Michael. Fantastic. On top of the world. Never better.
Yeah, well, that's always how it is. I never expected any less from you, my friend. Never expected any less. So what's on your mind today, sir? How are you going to uplift us? How are you going to coach us in the thing that is life?
Through death. Bob Proctor died recently. Bob Proctor most notably became a household name in about 2007 with his appearance on the movie The Secret. He was in the book and in the movie The Secret. But Bob had been teaching for about 50 years, probably 40 years prior to that. And he just died recently at 86. And Canadian, speaking of which, and theme with your program today.
Sorry.
Story, man. Story loser.
Sorry.
But he was a great guy, and I read his book years ago. It was called "You Were Born Rich," and in fact, for a while, he was just giving it away. He just you would just email in and join his newsletter, and he'd send you a copy of this book. But anyway, so I've been kind of studying it lately and thinking about Bob a little bit. Just what an impact he had on the world. Truthfully, he traveled the world speaking and motivating and inspiring people and teaching practical applicability to what he was teaching, not just, feel good, but he also had a lot of practical things. And one of them was called the vacuum law of prosperity. And actually, Catherine Ponder before him and others actually spoke on this early on, and Lawrence or Chauvel's Shin, I can't remember now. It's Florence Chauvel's kid, something like that. Anyway,
Okay.
So all the way back to 1900. So people have been teaching about this for a long time. But Bob's approach was, I thought, really practicable. And I thought, well, I would share that with you because, it makes such sense when you think about it physically. Nature abhors a vacuum. We all know that physically you remove something else will take its place. You can apply this to politics, law. You can apply this to your life, relationships, or just a new chair or a sofa or curtains in your house or whatever, or a job. If you're looking to replace something, you need to first remove the old thing. But when you think about it in terms of Carol Richardson said, a quality life is always about what you add to it, but what you remove. Sometimes it's about what you remove. And we are loath to do that sometimes because we cling or we hang on to the past, or we hang on to a physical thing that represents the past, or something we were once in love with, or something we once dreamed of having, and now we've got it, but we don't necessarily still want it. It's not necessarily serving us. Right. And you could think in terms of relationships even. Now, not every relationship can you discard or remove from your life because they're family, or they're very close to you, or they're coworkers, but you can insulate and shield yourself from those people. But to remove something from your life will naturally create room for something new, or someone new, or a new opportunity. So that's what I've been thinking about over the weekend. And I thought, I want to talk to Michael Dukes about this because I know you do a lot of vacuuming in your life, Michael.
Right. I do a lot of. So, you're saying basically clean out the attic or
Yep.
Clean out the storage unit of your life and
Precisely.
And get rid of it because, and you don't realize it a lot of times, but boy, there is some emotional baggage. Sometimes you're like, I've been holding on to this for 20 years and I get rid of this thing, whatever it was, thinking one day I'd have a use for it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got rid of it. And now I don't have to stress about it anymore. And now I don't, it's almost like a relief at some point when you declutter your life in that way.
And that is a great way to look at it. And I think in harmony with the vacuum law of prosperity is the removal of old, dead thoughts, old, dead memories that we talk about as, an old, dead memory, but in fact, it's alive and well, and maybe you're reliving it in your mind and you haven't let go of it. And there's another thing that I think corresponds to the vacuum law of prosperity, and that is forgiveness. And that is to forgive those that have trespassed you, but also to forgive yourself. Have you been in a situation where you wished you behaved differently, and yet instead of just learning from that and applying the lesson forward in your life, you'll just relive it again and again, and it brings back the same pain and the same holographic memories of shame or disdain, whatever it is. I think forgiveness is a huge component of this, and forgiving yourself is probably fundamental or foundational to this this vacuum law, because whatever you're holding there against yourself, you're not allowing for the new and for the vivacious and the new vibrations of good to come into your life, simply for the fact that in you is held up a bunch of garbage that needs to be let go of. That was yesterday. Let the dead bury the dead. That is gone. And there's a time I can remember. My dad is, he was probably at the time, about 73 years old. He's 78 now, but I'm going back 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe it was longer ago than that. But I was very protective of him, and I still am. But in a situation we were in, and there was somebody accosting somebody else, and my dad's first instinct was to get out of the truck. We were sitting in the truck. We had been checking on one of his properties together, and we were witnessing this. And these two people were just stoned out of their minds. probably, I mean, we're not talking good loving hippies on marijuana. This was probably, some meth heads that were going at each other. And my dad's first instinct was to go and jump in and help. And I said, Dad, get back. No, get in the truck. We're calling the cops. I'm not going to get stabbed over these two. I'm going to get stuck with something here. But I relive that memory and think, man, I so admire his wanting to jump into the fray and help the situation, and held it against myself for a long time. Why didn't I want to jump in and help? I can't believe, but
right.
I've let go of that. I got to move on. I mean, it's just a simple memory that I know for sure I had to work on for a while to let go of and go, okay, what would I do in the future? How would I handle it next time? Versus just get in the car. Let's call the cops and get out of here. That wasn't a proud moment. And for me. And so, but I've learned to let it go and move on. Otherwise, I would just sit there and spin on that. And that's a simple memory, but you've got your own. Everybody has them. Times that you wish you had behaved, acted, said something different. We've got to let go of that to make room for the good and the new to our life.
Chris Story is our guest, talking about the vacuum of our life, how we need to create. I guess, are we vacuuming out, or are we creating a vacuum that creates more, which creates more room for us? I guess it could be either way.
It's both. Yeah. I mean, so it's the idea of brooming out the old attic, but you are essentially just making room. You've got to, but it's emotional too. And so that's why I think that it's important to think in terms of making room for the new. It's not just about, it is about getting rid of the old things. There's a couch that you hate. There's a car, a vehicle you despise. There's something in your life that you just can't stand. But yet you hang on to it because, well, I got it. So I am suggesting go to Goodwill with it. I am suggesting pack up the old things that you're not going to wear again. Get rid of them. Make room for something new in your life. But also go deeper, look inside, and be willing to face those things that you haven't let go of, you haven't forgiven, you haven't forgotten, and just let go of some of that stuff too. So it is definitely multidimensional.
So as always, I now ask you to walk me through the process. So I've got an idea or a memory or a philosophy or something that's holding me back or hurting me in ways I may not even understand. Old stuff that I don't really need, that I'm having a hard time jettisoning and letting go of. So how do I go? Give me the practical application here.
I think just simply test it. And if it's easier to test it with something physical, then do it. Get rid of something, and I guarantee the new will come to you. Something will open up an opportunity. I'm not suggesting you go quit your job tomorrow, but if there's something physical, like maybe set of dishes. Here's a great example. This is the simplest way you could possibly start. Go to your cabinet, the cupboard where you keep all your coffee cups. I guarantee there's probably a handful that you don't use, don't like, can't remember where you got them, or do remember who you got them from and who gave them to you, and you're like, I can't stand these anymore, and I'm hanging on to them simply for that. Get rid of them. Make room. And if you end up with just a handful left, somebody will come to you, or an opportunity will present itself to bring you new and better. And that's a really simplistic, dumbed down kind of way to put this, but I think it's a great way to start and just test it out. On the other hand, if you're willing to delve even deeper, then it's about forgiveness and just picking a memory, such as I just shared there, where I was ashamed of myself, and I kept going back and reliving that moment and thinking, why didn't I grab the nunchucks from under the seat? I'm kidding. I don't have nunchucks, but you know what I mean. Why did I not jump in?
Why didn't I grab my AK and then go spray and pray, right? Or something.
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah,
Exactly. And so that was just an example I'm sharing, basically because it's something that I was so ashamed of for quite a while. And for months I kept reliving that, and just like, what happened generationally that he was willing to jump in? And I sort of mollified myself. I just said, I was there to protect my dad. But really, it was self-preservation. And that was a shameful, but I had to let it go and move on. And so I picked that as an opportunity to experiment with this. And it worked really well. And now I have this sense of forgiveness, and now I have a game plan going forward. So you pick something that is, when you relive it, it's not serving you well, or it's a memory, or I guess really this is about also sweeping away victimization. Any place in your life where you felt a victim, this is a good opportunity to experiment with vacuuming that. Get out the old mental Hoover, get rid of it, and make room for new. Make room for something better, because it's on its way. You just have to make room for it.
Well, it's an interesting concept. I mean, I'm thinking back, and I mean, while there have been bad areas of my life or bad decisions or things like that, I don't know. I guess I don't know if I feel like they're holding me back or letting me down. I mean, this is something that I guess I have to think on this a little bit more because, I mean, while I agree totally, and that's why I started with that in the beginning, I could totally identify with getting rid of stuff. I remember we lived in the same house for 20 years in North Poland. When we moved down to Wasilla, it was so cathartic because I had stuff that I was like, oh, I'm going to use that one day. And then I was like, nope, taking it to the reuse. Nope, to the dump. Nope, to the yard sale. Nope, I'm giving it away. And it felt so good when I got done. And I was like, I had decluttered my life in so many ways. But I don't know if I can apply that right yet to maybe I'm not grown enough yet to be able to apply it to my mental and my philosophy, my mental life, I guess, as opposed to my physical life. But I'm gonna have to give that some thought. Get the name of the book and the author again, and how he wrote about this vacuum.
Yeah, Bob Proctor, Canadian, great Canadian, just passed away recently. The book is called "You Were Born Rich," and he describes the vacuum law of prosperity. And it's funny because he starts out talking about his aunt who hated the curtains in her house. And he said to her, look, just get rid of them. And she, no, these are the curtains I've got. And it's, so again, a simplistic physical thing that is a great way to test this. Sure enough, she got rid of her curtains. And then lo and behold, just through an opportunity, these new wonderful chairs and curtains appeared and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not suggesting that it's magic. I'm not saying if you go throw a $10 bill down the sewer drain, you're going to find a 20 tomorrow. You might, but I'm not suggesting you try that. But I am wholeheartedly saying if you make room for the good in your life by brooming out and vacuuming out the old, the negative, the things that are no longer serving you or thoughts or ideas or habits, you could make way for an incredibly new and healthy life, a new and wealthy life, or just better relationships, whatever it is you're looking to improve. I think this law will literally work. And you don't even have to agree with it to test it. You can literally go test it with your coffee mugs.
Well, I mean, we all know that you've only really got 2 coffee mugs that you use, the one that you use and the other one that's dirty, and then you wash them and then reverse it. And it doesn't matter. I can open up my cupboard and there's 53 coffee mugs in there. I keep asking my wife, where do these come from? They're like multiplying like tribbles in the cupboard.
Breeding.
I only need these 2. These are the 2 I need. Every other one can go. So you and I know that's a hard truth right there. Chris Story is the author of the book called The Backyard Millionaire, which if you haven't read yet, it is fantastic. It's available at Amazon, also on audible.com in the audio book version of it, read by yours truly. And, of course, he writes about all different other kinds of things as well, working on The Making of Man, working on the Man series, I'm assuming.
Yeah, very excited about The Watchmen. The Watchmen is almost done, approaching the final chapter, and it's very exciting. The sequel to The Making of Man, which, by the way, I have to tell you, I'll tell you a story next week about that book and your audio version and what it did to a young family camping.
Okay. It scared the hell out of him, hopefully. All right.
Yes.
We'll be back next week then, and you can tell me the story of man next week. We'll start off with that. Chris Story, the man from Homer, thank you so much for coming on board today, my friend. As always, it's great to be with you. What's your website again? I keep forgetting it.
ilovehomeralaska.com.
Right. I'm always just know I'm going to screw it up, so I got to change it here on the screen. But ilovehomeralaska.com. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on board. Thanks for being part of it today.
Thank you, Michael. You suck.
Thank you so much. I am creating a vacuum. I create a vacuum in everyone's life. I'm just like that, I just suck. I suck their wills to live. That's how it works. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you next week. Chris Story, the man from Homer. All right, we're going to continue here. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. One segment when we return.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, in the break, Unload your toxic relationships. Wait, never mind, says Harold. Yeah, no, because if I had to unload my toxic relationships, I probably would have blocked you a long time ago, Harold. There's a hard truth in there. Sorry. It's just a hard truth in there. If I was looking to unload my toxic relationships, that probably would have been one of them. All right. Oh, Lord. Coming up on tomorrow's program, we are going to be interviewing Sean Thorne, who's a Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate here in the state of Alaska. I mean, why not? We're going to interview everybody we can. We've already done Randy Perham, and we've done Shabaka, and who else did we did somebody else. I've forgotten now who else we did. But we are going to also have reached out to Nick Begich's people. I'm trying to get them on board so that we can have him on as well. So we're trying to get the congressional candidates on the blower so that we can talk with them. That's the plan. That's the plan. And then Mike Shower is going to be joining us on Thursday, is what his wife has told me. So she's the one scheduling. She's the one that's scheduling that stuff for him to try and make sure that he stays accurate. We had Kirka on. Yep, we also had Kirka on. I was thinking about congressional candidates. We'll see if we can reach out to Bill Walker again and maybe Les Guerra. And this is a candidate that I hadn't heard of. I don't know why I didn't hear from it. Bruce Walden. Republican candidate Bruce Walden. I hadn't even heard of him. Bruce Walden and Tanya Lang. I don't even know who he is. He's not even there. There's not even a website. As soon as I put, let's see, Bruce Walden, Facebook. Yeah. He's from Palmer. He's filed to run for governor. Says he's not impressed with what he has seen so far. Okay, well, we'll see if we can get Bruce Walden on the thing. He's got a Facebook page. He's got a Facebook page. Bruce Walden. Oops, is that it? That's that's for assembly, but he's running for governor now too. All right, so we'll see. We'll get a chance to chat with him as I haven't reached out to him yet. So, Randy Perham does not live in Alaska. He lives in Texas. Well, Alaska is his state of residency. He's in Texas right now. He was in Italy earlier last year. I'm not sure if he has fulfilled the requirement as per federal law, but we interviewed him last year when he was in between places. Not sure if it's the same, but I don't think bad outweighs the good. All experiences is the sum total of who you are. It's how you go forward, embracing all those experiences that make you now, says Givens. And, that's kind of what I was having a hard time wrapping my brain around that. I mean, I can't think of anything. I mean, I've made bad choices for sure, but at the same time, those choices brought me to where I'm at. So I don't know if I can forget. Maybe it is more about, he said, the forgiveness aspect than the forgetting aspect. But anyway, I don't know. Okay. So we're gonna reach out to Bruce Walden. And I suppose we should get a hold of Billy Toyne as well. And then we will also be talking with Sean tomorrow. Am I right? I'm just making sure that I'm right so that I don't step in it. Come on. There we go. Sean Thorne, Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate. He will be joining us tomorrow at 6:24 a.m. And that should be good stuff. That should be fun. All right. Well, we're 1 minute out. I'm voting Nick Begich for Congress. He seems like the most solid option of the three. Young has gotten so out of touch seriously and off his vaccine mandate. Yeah, that was a pretty interesting turn of events. We talked about that a bit yesterday. Maybe we should talk about that again here this morning, but definitely an interesting turn of events on that one for sure. All right, do me a favor. Like and share this video. Like and follow the show page on Facebook as well. Hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. That's what I'm asking you to do. Oh, Susie says he owns a house in Texas. He has no intention of living in Alaska. His campaign manager quit him. Well, there you go. I interviewed him like a year ago, so things have obviously changed since then. Thank you, Susie, for the heads up. All right, here we go. Jumping back into it. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio, The Michael Duke Show. Let's do this. No, let me do this. No. Well, howdy, howdy, howdy. I'm a cowboy this morning. Oh, man. You remember the earthquake back in 2018? Now, I was lucky during that earthquake because we were all at home. I was broadcasting at the time. I was in the studio. It was like right after I finished the show. In fact, I was wrapping up the podcast and everything. And the earthquake hit. And luckily, my daughter, whose husband was deployed at the time to Qatar, she was living with us. And so I knew where everybody is. All my immediate family was there in the house. And so I could check on everybody. And it was fine. Now, for others, it wasn't so fine. People had already left for work. People had family members and children that were out and about, and people were worried. They didn't know what to do. And when you tried to make a cell phone call that morning, it was hit or miss. Let's put it that way. And that all came down to cellular congestion, which is not just a problem during disasters. It can be a problem during certain times of the day, during certain weather conditions and everything else. Cellular congestion, a growing problem. It would definitely woke you up. And, of course, I was worried, and I was worried about my friends. I was worried about my family, my coworkers. But if you face a disaster like that and the cell phone tower goes down, what do? Well, my friends, if you have a bivy stick, you don't have anything to worry about. Ta-da! The bivy stick. This little teeny tiny device that pairs with your cell phone and turns it into a satellite short burst data connection. When you connect this to your cell phone, you can send text messages. You can send emails. You can get immediate emergency weather reports. You can get your map pins. You can drop a pin to tell people where you are. There's all different kinds of things you can do with this little teeny tiny device. Best of all, in the case of an emergency, you can tell each other not only if you're okay, but if you're not okay, you can send an SOS. You could send a message saying, "I'm hurt. The telephone pole is fallen in my car and I'm trapped and I'm pinned. Come get me. Here's where I am." You don't even have to know the actual street. You just drop the pin and it drops it to you and it can be seen by others. That's the beauty of this, that no matter what's going on, you can be in contact. That's why I have one. That's why my wife has got one coming. We're going to throw that and she'll have it in her glove box. She'll be ready to go, maybe her purse. And the best part is that once it's charged, once you turn it on, it's got 5 days worth of charge on it. 5 continuous days of usage. It's got no activation fees. It only costs $199, and you can get a plan that's unlimited for like $45 a month. That's the plan that I'm on. Or you can get a plan that's like an emergency plan, and that's the plan I'm going to put my wife on. It's like $14 a month just to know that she is safe And no matter where she is, she can hit the button. She can tell me she's safe, or she can pull the ripcord for the SOS button to let me know she's in trouble. And that can send both a text and it can send an email to let people know where you're at. Not just what's going on, but where you're at. If you can't get to your phone and it's connected and the device is on, you could still, it's programmed with those immediate, check-ins or the immediate SOS codes. You can do that as well. And it's got all different kinds of new stuff that they're rolling out. They're rolling out some new features that I can't even talk about right now, but they've already told me about, that are going to be super, super cool, especially for you snow machiners or your hunters who like to go out in a group. You're going to want to take a look at this bivy stick, which is available all across the state of Alaska at a local dealer. So if you're a hunter, a fisher, a snow machiner, a doctor, a truck driver, an Avon lady, a soccer mom, whatever, domestic goddess, you need one of these bivy sticks. You can find out more at satellitewest.com. Just click on the bivy logo, or you can go to your local dealer in Dutch Harbor, Lundy Marine Electronics, in Kodiak, Radar Alaska, in Homer, South Central Radar on the Spit, in Fairbanks, Arctic Fire and Safety, in Seward, Communications North, and in Wasilla, Anchorage, or Soldotna, go to Safe and Sound. And make sure you ask for the manager at Safe and Sound, because if one of the counter people doesn't know, somebody in Wasilla didn't know what they were talking about when a listener came in. I got an email. Turned out that the guy who knew about him was, anyway, talk to the manager. Ask to speak to the manager if that's part of the problem. But this bivy stick is the cat's meow right here. I'm telling you. Check it out. Boom, right there. I'm going to put that back in my pocket because I want to keep it with me. How does a bivy handle extreme cold? It handles extreme cold extremely well. There you go. Extreme and extreme, two in the same sentence. All right. We're coming up at the end of the show here this morning. I didn't get a chance to talk about the Canadian trucker thing, although I will announce that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, let's go Barbara, has suspended the civil liberties in his country as of Monday. He enacted national and basically the Canadians' versions of martial law. The Emergencies Act is effective for 30 days and allows Trudeau's government to ban public assembly, ban travel, and outlaw the use of certain properties like big rigs. His emergency order means the government may use any means necessary without approval from Parliament to unblock the streets of the capital, where hundreds of trucks are parked in protest of his vaccine mandate and other mandates. And he's going to do it because authoritarian's going to authoritate, right? Dictator's going to dictate. That's what they do. He said he will not. He said he will not, by the way, call in the military, but it will grant more power to the police, these actions. So, of course, the Canadians also ordered the website Go Send Go, that they couldn't give the money to the Canadian truckers, and Go Send Go said, well, you're not in America, so go screw yourself. And they gave the money to the truckers anyway because it was a Canadian court that said it. And they're like, well, we're not in Canada. Have a nice day. Let's go over to the phones, catch a couple calls here before we go to break. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael. This is Bubba calling from North Pole.
What's up?
And just a really quick comment about this problems we have retaining people because of our retirement system up here.
Right.
Let me see. If I got it right, I can go to work for the state for 5 years. I can pay 5 years so I can get a 10-year retirement.
Well, I don't know if that's exactly it, but I know that it's a pretty lucrative retirement plan for a defined contribution plan that they will match you for whatever you save. That's a pretty good deal. There's not a lot of people out there that'll do that these days. You save $10,000, you'll get 20 back. Yeah, exactly.
Such a deal.
Such a deal.
We have a very bad system, though.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible system. Yeah.
I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Thanks, Bubba. Appreciate it. Appreciate you calling in. One final call here before we run out of daylight. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Mike. Jeff from Homer.
Jeff, quickly.
Yeah, you're exactly right about the Canadians up there. He is definitely a dictator, and he has no real probable cause to do what he's doing because he wants them to take that shot, and that should be illegal all around the world as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
I mean, more and more is coming out about those shots, and more and more is being said, and we're in a situation here in the United States where it's purely political because, the Democrats have backed off now and mandates are going away.
And I think
they're losing in the polls.
I think even more importantly, it's because he doesn't like looking bad. That's the thing, Jeff. He just doesn't like looking bad. And oh boy, is he looking bad these days. Appreciate you coming on board. We're out of time for today. Folks, tomorrow, Sean Thorne, candidate for Congress, Libertarian candidate, will be joining us, and more. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. All right, my friends, we are out of time. Let's hope tomorrow brings better technology issues, and we can be on both Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and everything else all at the same time. Thanks for coming in. We will see you tomorrow, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.